Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
Welcome to another episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. This is your host, Kush Khandelwal. Today, we are diving into a topic that becomes increasingly important as we navigate the changes that come with being an athlete in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. Mental training. While physical changes are inevitable as we age, it's our mindset that often determines whether we continue to push boundaries, overcome challenges, and find joy in the sports we love. Whether you are facing new limitations, dealing with heightened fears, or simply trying to stay motivated, developing mental resilience is key to staying active and engaged. Today, you will discover how to harness the power of your mind to not just cope with these changes, but to thrive through them. We will explore practical strategies for managing fear, staying present, and cultivating a positive mindset, tools that can lead to breakthroughs in performance, even as our body evolves. These insights are crucial for anyone looking to maintain their athletic edge and stay connected to their passion. Our guest is none other than Hazel Findlay, a world renowned professional climber, coach, and mindset expert. I first encountered Hazel's incredible skill and wisdom years ago at a climbing festival screening. Watching her move so confidently on the rock was mesmerizing, but what really captivated me was hearing her speak afterward. Her insights into the mental aspects of climbing were not only profound, but also deeply relatable. And I knew that Hazel was someone who brought a unique and invaluable perspective to the sport. With 29 years of climbing experience, Hazel has achieved remarkable feats, including being the first woman to climb a British trad route at E9 and free climbed El Cap not once, not twice, but 4 times. Beyond her physical accomplishments, Hazel has dedicated herself to the mental side of sport, helping athletes of all levels unlock their full potential, especially as they age. Today, we will have Hazel share her extensive knowledge on how to mentally train for sport. She will explain why mental training is just as crucial, if not more so, than physical training as we get older, and how you can start implementing these practices to continue thriving in your athletic journey. Whether you are a seasoned climber or simply someone looking to maintain your passion for sport as you age, Hazel's wisdom will resonate deeply. This conversation is packed with practical advice, inspiring stories, and a fresh perspective on how to stay ageless in both mind and body, even when physical capabilities begin to shift. Whether you are a seasoned climber or simply someone striving to maintain your passion for sport as you age, Hazel's wisdom will resonate deeply. The conversation is packed with practical advice, inspiring stories, and a fresh perspective on how to stay ageless in both mind and body. So let's roll.
So I'm currently in North Wales in the UK, and I had what I always have for breakfast, which is yogurt, muesli, and berries.
That sounds delicious. May I add that you might be eating for more than one person, so hopefully you have you're fueling up.
Yeah, it's actually, yeah. I mean, you're supposed to eat a little bit more when you're pregnant. Yeah, I should say I'm pregnant for the listeners. But it's actually hard because your stomach shrinks. So I don't really know how you're supposed to eat a lot more, honestly.
Mm,
Yeah, just smaller portions, I guess.
sure. Yes. I can't tell you anything about being pregnant, but I can imagine that there is the space in your system is being contested for, and food needs to find its way. And
Yes.
hopefully, you're finding both nutrition and maybe a chance to indulge in some foods that you may not otherwise allow yourself.
I don't know. I'm one of these people. I just if I want to eat something, I'll eat it. That's my, you know. I don't really yeah, I'm not too militant about these things. I just think that if you just feel bad if you eat all of bad food too much, don't you? And so as long as you listen to that, I think that's a good way to live, I think.
I will admit that I'm mildly starstruck. I have been enjoying following your adventures over the last decade plus. But for those of us who don't know who you are, can you please tell us who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so I am still a professional climber, although it's hard to think of yourself as a professional climber when you're 7 months pregnant. But I am still a professional climber. But I'm also a coach, and I specialize in helping people with mindset and fear management. And I mostly work with climbers. I'm also just like a trained coach in general. So I have also worked with people sort of outside of the climbing context. And then I also have a business called Strong Mind, and we essentially kind of educate and train and mostly create online courses in the space of fear management and performance psychology in climbing.
Brilliant. I would have introduced you at this point and highlighted some of your, let's say, noteworthy climbing accomplishments. But let me ask you this. I think you may have first caught my eye, and maybe the eye of many of your fans worldwide when we watched this Real Rock movie. I believe you were climbing in the cliffs on the coast, and I think you were being belayed by your dad. I would love for you to describe the climb and the setting and what made it so remarkable.
I guess not to sort of downplay it, but it probably looks more remarkable if you're not used to sea cliffs. Whereas I kind of grew up on sea cliffs. But there is something very wild about climbing next to the ocean if you haven't done that before. Um, and this particular sea cliff is quite intimidating looking. It's quite a sort of sheer slab. It doesn't have many features on it. Um, and it also doesn't have any bolts in it. So in climbing, there's like trad climbing and sport climbing. And trad climbing, you place your own gear, but many people are used to seeing lots of cracks and opportunities to place protection that's going to prevent them from falling too far. Whereas this particular climb, it has like very spaced protection. So if you fell in certain places, it wouldn't be super great for you. So it's a very psychologically demanding climb, and I think that the film conveys that quite well, I imagine, and that's probably where I guess most people sort of learn about me. I think was it 2011? It's like such a long time ago now.
It was a decade plus, yes, I think.
Yeah, which makes me feel kind of old, which is fitting for the podcast.
Hazel, you are classically understated, as I suppose I would expect you to, given your UK lineage. But that climb is positively scary. Not only do you not have opportunities to place much gear, it is also physically very, very hard. I believe amongst some of the most challenging type of routes, even if that route was like not against this wild ocean, even if it was on, somewhere a little less intimidating, it would still be quite difficult. But the part that I want to also draw people's attention to is you were being belayed by your dad. Now, what I find remarkable about that is I believe your dad is also an accomplished climber. However, when it comes to one's own kids, parents tend to become a little irrational. I remember being a young boy and going to the ocean with my brother, younger brother, and my mom, getting so, yeah, just panicking when we would run towards waves which would maybe barely reach our knees. So I'm curious, how did your dad become comfortable belaying with you on that climb? Which has such high objective hazards. I mean, injury or worse.
Yeah, so my dad was always pretty relaxed. There's only a few times where he would be worried for me. And I think the reason why he wasn't, like, he was not stressed. He was a little bit stressed maybe on that feeling, me on that one. But part of that was because the tide was coming in as well. But I think two things is that he really understands climbing, so he sadly died actually last year. So if I speak about him in the past tense, that's why. Um, but he was a very experienced climber himself, and I don't know anything about your mum, but maybe she would have felt differently had she been a surfer. So I think so much of fear and anxiety comes from kind of not understanding things. And my dad really understood climbing, but he also had seen me climb from a young age. I'd spent, and he trusted me. So that he knew I wasn't a crazy person doing something crazy. He trusted my ability to do that climb and to approach it in a risk conscious way. So I think that's kind of what enabled him to sort of be okay. But I think some of the fear that, I'm about to be a parent, so we'll see, what happens for me. But I think a lot of the kind of the fear that parents get is from the unknowns around things. Whereas if you're an experienced climber and you know that and you trust the judgment of your child, then also I was an adult at the time too, so that obviously changes things.
Certainly, your dad, being a climber himself, I suppose he could distinguish between the objective and the subjective hazards. I mean, when you see like those waves crashing against the cliff and the sounds they make, there is some coastal climbing up here in San Francisco and Marin, and it's all bolted. But when you are there and you find that the wind is blowing your hat away, and the wind is strong, the noise it makes, and then the tide comes in, and I think that is a little bit more subjective because it creates for this imagery. But then your dad, I think, also understood your capabilities on the rock, on why what you were climbing was well within your limit, and maybe that allowed. And it's funny. I think a lot of your coaching involves helping people get comfortable with falling, which is often safe, but again, it looks visually quite daunting. I accidentally normalized my parents with the idea of falling. 2 years ago, I went to climb in Turkey in Geyik Bayri, which you probably have visited, and took my parents out to one of the cliffs nearby. And it was this great lively setting. There were climbers of all ages, many women there as well. And my parents saw people basically climb and fall all day. So when they started seeing me trying my projects, and they saw me fall, I think they might have lifted an eyebrow, but then I think they went back to taking a nap and eating their snack.
Nice.
So it's interesting how once you take that a subjective fear away, and you normalize things, then people start acting a bit more rationally. Hazel, let's start. Let's talk about your coaching a little bit. It's not, let's say, a normal career path that I find professional, accomplished climbers take. So, how and when did you decide to become a coach? Is that something uh, that you wanted to do as a part of some latent, let's say, qualities you had, or yeah, uh, tell us more.
I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24/7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one size fits all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, I was always just really interested in psychology and psychology in climbing. And I noticed from a really early age that it was like our state of mind, like what's actually going on in our minds when we climb, that is the biggest factor that will make a climber either be good at climbing or stick at the sport or enjoy the sport. I just noticed this really, really early on. And I think part of that was because I was like a young girl in a very male dominated sport, not just male dominated, but also kind of middle aged male dominated, right? So you'd have these big men who were very obviously much stronger than me, but some of them were not able to climb as well. And the main factor in that was often just what was going on in their minds, like how well they were able to use their bodies, how stressed they could be. And it also struck me, that like here I was, like this young girl who, like, everyone expected to be less brave, but that also wasn't the case. That sometimes I could be braver than someone who was older or someone of a different gender. So it's something I just noticed really early on, and I just took an interest in. And I actually had my first coaching client when I was 18, when I was at university. But it was like such a bad idea because I really didn't know what I was doing. I had no training. I just read a few books and I was like, well, I can do this myself. I know how to kind of manage my fear to some extent. So surely I can help someone else. And I ended up giving him his money back because I did not help him at all. But luckily he was a friend and we stayed friends, and I don't think I made him any worse, but I didn't really help. And then I just focused on my own climbing, and I didn't really think too much about it, but it was always kind of in the back of my head. I actually had a really chronic shoulder injury for many years, and it really made me question, like, oh, can I even climb to a high level anymore? Can I still be a professional climber? Is this shoulder injury going to bug me forever? So that's when I kind of started thinking, maybe I need to like diversify my career. And that's when I kind of like started studying again and basically going through the motions of starting a coaching business, essentially.
Many of us find ourselves in uncomfortable situations when, let's say, we pursue a sport which is somewhat off the mainstream, and we take it to a certain level with our time and our obsession with it. But you must have had, let's say, a latent curiosity about yourself, and maybe a level of self-awareness with which you dealt with some of these issues yourself that you talked about, things such as doubt in yourself, things such as introspection of what your future might hold with your own climbing prowess. At the same time, you observed certain things about these other climbers and athletes in your midst, and you must have sensed that there was something that you could do to help them. Today, when you coach athletes, please tell us, who are these people who come to you? What do you help them with?
Yeah, so I guess the main things I help people with, I help climbers with fear of falling. I think that's one of the sort of the biggest distractions. I would think of it as a distraction in our sport. It distracts us from focusing on the climbing. I also help people with fear of failure. Is massive in climbing. Climbing is a very outcome-based sport. So you compare it to something like surfing or even trail running, actually, I think is less outcome based, even though you can kind of time running. And I think that it very much lends itself to creating a fear of failure in many people. We also sort of project things. It's very black. Sort of the metric of success and failure is very black and white in climbing. So that can cause mindset issues, fear of failure, also kind of self-doubt, potentially like low confidence or self-worth issues. So yeah, they're kind of the main things that I guess I help people with. I help people with the things that they're scared of in climbing, the things that kind of create stress. But then I also might just help someone optimize what they're doing. So they might not have like this big thing that's preventing them from climbing at their best. They might just want to explore, okay, what could I do differently that would help me progress faster or would help me focus better in the moment? So just like helping them, like teaching them tools that they can use in the moment, or helping them, recalibrate their mindset just so that they're kind of optimizing what they do, basically. And we're so used to kind of thinking of that in physical terms, right? Like, I'm going to tweak my nutrition, I'm going to tweak my sleep, I'm going to tweak my power training and my endurance training. But we don't think of that of doing that from a mental perspective, which is actually really self-limiting and just doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about it. Like, all the kind of like the best leaders in the world, or the people who really want to be at their best, they're going to have someone helping them with their psychology, with how they approach things, with their mindset. So it's kind of weird that we're not quite there with sport yet, but I think it is changing.
And Hazel, what are, let's say, some of the gender and age demographics of the people that you help?
With our online courses, I do need to look at the stats again, but I think we are slightly female dominated, but I would say it's pretty equal who the students. It's probably 50-50 ish, maybe slightly more women who do our courses. But women are much more engaged. They are. I think we still there's still this stereotype that men are supposed to be brave. So I think it's harder for men to kind of talk about their fear. So even though we get a lot of men do our courses, when it comes to the live calls or asking questions or sharing their experiences, I think they generally find it a little bit harder than the women overall, which is unfortunate. And then just in my own personal coaching, I'd say it's kind of 50-50 men and women. And then in terms of age, full spectrum, but I would say mostly sort of early 30s to 50s, I would say. Mostly just because I think younger people have got less money. So, they just, the kind of luxury of having a mental coach in climbing is probably just not as feasible for younger people. I think although I have coached a lot of younger people, and then I coach quite a few sort of teens, but of course it's their parents that pay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for describing your course and your offering. And I might cherry pick a little bit. So many rich topics to pick from. But one thing I will say right away about the gender breakdown and about men being slightly less forthcoming, I will raise my hand up as a 46-year-old male. I will just say guilty as charged. The mental aspect of training is just hitting me now. In my 20s or even in my early 30s, it's not something that I might have scoffed at it. So I think men are losing out if they're not embracing the virtues of treating their mind as well as their body. Let me ask you this to start off with. Athletes are often preoccupied with their physical training, right? Climbers famously so, but honestly, even surfers, bikers, runners, I speak with athletes up and down the spectrum, and we obsess over the physical element of what gets us ready. However, mental training, which seems just as crucial, is ignored. Can you tell us broadly why is this so?
Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing, it's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the nature of the mind and the body, it's not really that surprising. I mean, you only have to look at sort of the amount of research that's gone into physical health versus mental health to see, you know, that like the difference is there. It's just so much harder to talk about our conscious experience. It's so much harder to measure it. It's so much harder to track progress in it. I mean, so I'm partway through a master's in psychology and neuroscience of mental health, and like my main takeaway from doing this course is how little we know about the brain and about the mind and how it connects with the body, and just things that, like, conditions like depression that affect millions and millions of people around the world. we have some solutions to help with depression, but we don't fully understand it. There's so many different reasons why you might suffer from depression, and there's so many different ways that someone might intervene and help you. So it's just messy. The human conscious experience is messy. It's really difficult to understand. And it's messy even when you're just trying to think about yourself, like, trying to track how you feel before you climb, and your thoughts and your emotions and how that affects your performance. It's hard. It's really hard. I love it. I think it's interesting. I enjoy the messiness of it. A lot of people don't. And they want to just go, this is too difficult for me. It's so much easier for me to just learn about muscular function, learn about how many reps I need to do and how many sets to improve my muscular function. And I like, some people just love getting nitty gritty with these kinds of details about their physiology. And I think a lot of people who are attracted to sports, especially like running and biking and even climbing to some extent, part of the reason why they love those sports is because they like that physical aspect of it, right? And seeing that progress and trying to gamify physical training. So it is quite obvious, really, when you think about it, why there is this gap between. I think there's also been quite a lot of stigma attached to psychology. People necessarily think that if you've got a problem, it's because you've got a mental health problem. But it's like, that doesn't make any sense, because as a healthy person, you still want to optimize what you do physically. So you don't have to be mentally unwell to try to optimize what you're doing mentally. But because of the stigma around mental health, I think there has been a barrier for people exploring as well. And yeah, just I think in Western culture, we don't tend to kind of look at our internal worlds. Other cultures are much more investigative around their inner experience. Like if you look at kind of Buddhist cultures, they're very interested in what's actually going on in the mind. Whereas I think Western cultures, haven't so much done that. So there's a few reasons, but I think the main one is just the human experience is very complex.
One thing which just struck me when you were speaking was, when it comes to our physical health, we don't wait until we are, let's say, really injured, or let's say reach a point of, let's say, morbid obesity before we start thinking about physical training. But with mental training, you're right, people really have to fall down a ditch before they think about what measures they need to get past mental health. Another thing that I think the sports that, let's say, you and I deal with, and maybe even this podcast deals with, are these more niche outdoor sports, which take place, lifestyle sports where people are obsessive. At the same time, these sports haven't received, let's say, the due share of investigation and scientific research. Do you think more mainstream sports actually do a better job with mental preparation? The soccers, the tennises, the tracks, and all that, than the climbing and the surfing and the running and whatnot?
Yeah, I guess I don't know, just because I'm not in those sports. But when I watch TV, I get mixed messages, to be honest, because, there's quite a lot of sport on TV now, like in the Netflix documentary series, like Drive to Survive, or there's one about golfing, and there's one about the Tour de France. And when I watch them, it's clear that someone's kind of what's really interesting when I see those shows is that the psychology is always a theme. It's always a theme that someone is limited by their headspace. And it's always one of the most interesting aspects of the show, watching someone who should have won if it was just on their skill, but they don't because, something's going on at home, or because they had all this pressure on them to win, or because they lost their confidence somehow because they had a bad experience or something. And yet, some of these athletes have a psychologist, but a lot of them don't. And some of them, it's like they're literally millionaires, billionaire golfers, right? They could easily pay someone to, like, the best sports psychologist in the world to help them, but there's this fear around it. So I think, some sports are probably doing it well. And I think that when you look at team sports that have kind of a team of people and there's like an industry, there'll be experts in that space, even if they're not necessarily working like super formally one-to-one with the athletes, but there'll certainly be people who are focused on mindset and sports psychology, like within a football club, for example. So I think, yes, some sports are kind of doing it better. I see a huge amount of neglect still, even in some of the bigger sports, I would say.
I think a lot of it could again come down to how, as perhaps humans, we are always looking to quantify progress. And with mental techniques, it is a little bit harder to be able to measure. Let's put a pin on that and come back to that later. I want to talk about this one thing, which I think is what a lot of people approach you for, is overcoming the risk of falling. I have a slightly different question to ask, though, which is some of us who have been around the sport for a long time, we may not, like, I can log, I don't know, hundreds of falls on a sport climb, even on a well-protected track climb, and have no issues. But one thing that I am dealing with is about a decade plus years ago, I took a bad fall in my early years as a wannabe track climber, and made a lot of mistakes that I've written about and I have mostly understood and reconciled, and I've worked hard to train properly and learn from my mistakes. But one thing that I started facing only in the last few years, with maybe again getting older, is that I started getting some level of anxiety when doing long climbs in the alpine with long runouts. You're familiar with places like Tuolumne, having climbed in Yosemite, where you have this long day ahead of you and you have to kind of execute from dawn to dusk. And I started getting afraid of things that could go wrong. Some of them were probably subjective, but maybe some of them were actually real as well. And then the other thing that started happening with me was in the last few years, I've had 3 people that I know who were more accomplished at climbing than I was, and they succumbed to injuries that happened while they were out climbing. So all of that has created a bit of a cloud in my head. So when I go and or when I try to plan for these kinds of big climbs, I get struck with a little bit of PTSD. And I am wondering if you have helped people dealing with similar anxiety and issues with, let's say, climbing or otherwise PTSD type of scenarios, and how would somebody work towards overcoming those?
Yeah, I mean, with your particular case that you've described, that I'd probably want to ask you quite a lot more questions before I could really sort of explore kind of the best options. PTSD is like an actual mental health condition, and it's not something I'm trained to deal with, but I don't know if you feel like you kind of had PTSD, or whether you're kind of using PTSD to describe something that's maybe not as serious as an actual trauma response.
You're right. I don't mean to use the term PTSD flippantly, but maybe popular culture has somehow enabled me to start throwing around that term. I should be careful of how I use the term. I guess I don't have a good term to describe it. It's just something that I am facing, and I think many people are facing as well. You could be in a situation such as myself, and having
So,
had, let's say, climbed for a long time, and suddenly not having the desire to push oneself when one is crushing that threshold between what is safe and what is not safe.
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together: training, aging, mindset, and awe. You will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
yeah, so I mean, maybe like to just give some language to it. Climbing is a sport that is psychologically demanding. And we, just in the same way that we can overload our muscles and cause an injury, we can overload our nervous system and create small injury, just as an analogy here, not like an actual injury, but something that's analogous to a small injury, analogous to maybe like burnout of your physical system, or you can create a big injury that's analogous to, like, I don't know, breaking your leg or something, and that would be like PTSD. So it is a spectrum, right? When we overdo it, we stress the mind in ways where it can be difficult to recover. So ideally, how we kind of learn from a psychological perspective in climbing is through optimally challenging ourselves. So you might have heard of exposure therapy, right? You gradually expose yourself to these things that you find scary. And a really like simple way of thinking about this is like with phobias. Like, say you had a fear of spiders. You wouldn't like jump in a bath of spiders to get over your fear of spiders, right? Like that would totally freak you out. What you might do is you might like watch a TV show about spiders. You might hold a tiny, tiny spider first, and then you might slowly be closer or nearer to bigger spiders, right? And you'd slowly learn these spiders are not going to hurt me. So it's kind of the same with these different aspects of climbing or whatever sport it is you're doing. Like, say you're a trail runner and or maybe a better example is a road biker and you're scared of the downhills. You don't go on the steepest downhill that's super windy and really scary straight away, right? You build your confidence and you slowly expose yourself to steeper and steeper hills on your bike. It's very easy in climbing to kind of overstress the nervous system, and it doesn't even have to be something that happens to you. Like if you have an accident, this is something that can really stress your nervous system. It can create fear memories. It can cause you to be more scared when you go back to climbing next time. But even just having friends who've had accidents or hearing stories or all of these things affect how we relate to the sports that we're doing. And they can cause anxiety, cause a stress response. So it's kind of about navigating all of that, really. And there's not necessarily easy solutions. But I think the first thing to really think about is to go, how am I actually challenging myself in the sport? Am I underdoing it where I like don't challenge myself at all? Or am I overdoing it? Or am I getting it just right? And that's kind of like the start of fear management really is actually building the self-awareness around, okay, how am I actually feeling in these moments? Am I going out and I'm scared shitless and I'm terrified and I'm having a bad time, and I come away and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that again? Or am I going out and I'm bored because it's not even that exciting for me anymore? Or am I going out and I'm having this really fun day where it's like a little bit scary, it's a little bit challenging, but I'm totally managing it, And so just reflecting on your experiences and going, okay, how can I challenge myself in the best way? This is a really good start when thinking about fear management in anything that you're doing. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, that was super helpful, and we can't just we could just complete this whole conversation on that one thread. But I think what I'm learning is that there is hope for let's say people like me stuck in maybe this kind of situation where with the right training, coaching, and application, I can learn to get past whatever obstacle I am experiencing or others are. On the subject of risk again, but moving on a little bit, a slightly more fun question. Hazel, you have spent a considerable amount of time climbing with, let's say, another celebrity in our midst, Alex Honnold, right? You knew where this was going, but could you demystify Alex's fear management techniques by having observed him up close and personal, including, let's say, this TV series that many people might have watched? What I want to identify is that I think popular media doesn't understand the kind of risk that Alex takes or other free soloists takes. And I think you do that really well. So let me just say that. So help us understand, or let's say help us demystify
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
Alex
Yeah, I
deals
mean, I
with
can
fear
do
and
that to
risk.
some extent, but Alex is unusual, it would be nice to say, he's totally normal, he's just a human, he's just practiced loads. But I do actually think there is something kind of unique about him and about probably about his fear management system. We need to know more about the brain, although they have actually studied his amygdala, and they found that it wasn't as active as other people's are. But I'm a bit skeptical about those studies. He isn't just like that. He has put in a lot of training, and that process that I was just talking about of kind of gradually increasing the challenge level, he's been doing that all his life, ever since he was a kid. And when he first started climbing, he didn't have many climbing partners, and he just started soloing. And he did not start soloing 513s. He started soloing 5.6s, right? And he slowly built himself up. And if you watch Alone on the Wall, where he ends up on Half Dome and he kind of freaks out a bit, this is an example of when he got that challenge level a little bit wrong. It wasn't so wrong that he freaked out and fell or that he needed to be rescued, but his stress response was too high. He wasn't prepared enough for what he was doing. But he went away, he learned from that. And then when he came to free solo freerider on El Cap, he was much better prepared for it, so that when he did that, it was like the perfect challenge level for him at that time. So part of the demystification is just like understanding how many hours he's put to free soloing, and how much time, if you dedicated that much time to anything, I reckon you'd probably be pretty good at it. But like any of the best athletes in the world, or the best people at anything in the world, there's a little bit, I think, of nature there. It's not just practice. I think if I know Alex, and he doesn't really get stressed by other things either. He generally keeps a fairly cool head. It's not that he doesn't have any emotions, but he is quite logical. He's very analytical. he's quite unique. It's sort of like, Usain Bolt practiced running a lot, trained a lot, but is there probably something a little bit unusual about his genetics that makes him the fastest person? No one's even beaten his record at 100 meters, right? Yeah, there's probably something about his genetics. Could I ever run as fast as Usain Bolt? If I did exactly what he did, no, I would be so super slow. So that's how I see it. It's a very good combination of training, and also some natural talent there as well.
Hazel, that insight is invaluable, I think. And like many things, people will look at what they see at the very tip of the iceberg that floats above the water, and they'll see Alex's, otherworldly achievements, but they forget the baseline that he's built over, I don't know, 10,000 hours, maybe 100,000 hours and beyond of practice since he was a young boy. And maybe this is that perfect medley of talent, or let's say that freakish ability that he has to manage risk, along with all of that practice that allows him to do these things that people are mystified, dazzled, and maybe a little bit confused by. You also spoke about working with athletes up and down the older age spectrum. So I'm wondering, beyond the things we have spoken about, are there topics, issues that you're helping climbers deal with who are, again, let's say 40 or older?
With my older clients, fear of injury seems to come up more. You start to maybe not trust your body as much as when you did in your 20s, and also recovery can be slower as you get older. So that's maybe the reason why there's more fear there. And so I've helped people a little bit with that. But I actually think that the biggest way to approach those fears is actually from a physical perspective in many cases. And, I'm not that old. I'm 35. I actually haven't noticed a huge difference in my physical capacity, to be honest. Mostly because like what I do is so variable anyway. Like my lifestyle's so different now to how it was in my 20s. It's kind of hard to make comparisons. But I'm actually less injured now than I was in my 20s. And so much of that is actually just I have better knowledge, and I'm like more ready to just like pay for a coach or pay for a physio and to reach out to experts. Whereas in my 20s, I was like always trying to save money. I was also always on the road traveling, and I just didn't have great knowledge around like how to be physically robust. There was also not as good knowledge in climbing back then. Now we have so much good knowledge around physical training and injury prevention specific to climbing. I think that knowledge is power. And I think just arming yourself with the training tools that you need to like have a robust body is actually the best way to manage some of these fears. It might be helpful to speak to a coach as well, especially if you feel it's like bordering on like the kind of slightly irrational and it's actually really limiting what you can do and like preventing you from trying hard and stuff. It can be worth reaching out to a coach to help you with that more mental aspect of it. But I think so much of it is like, if you feel confident in your body, if you feel like you can kind of do a dynamic move and your shoulder is going to be okay, it's that feedback you need to feel. If you don't feel that, then it's going to be hard for you to kind of move past those fears. And then, sometimes fear of falling can increase because there's this perception that if you fall, you're more likely to injure yourself. And so, but really my approach to that would be the same as anyone's approach. As if I was working with anyone around fear of falling, it would be through practice, graduated exposure therapy, that kind of thing. So yeah, not like super specific stuff to age, but one thing I would just say about age and about what I do, and that comes up so much, is that it's really the best way for you to progress. Mental training is the best way for you to progress as you get older, because yeah, you might still be progressing physically, you might not be, but if you've never devoted any time to mental training, then this is like a whole new world for you to explore. And some of the most satisfying clients that I've ever worked with have been older clients who have thought that they will never get better at the sport. And then they learn how to fall, for example. They learn how to push themselves. And, I worked with a woman last year who was 50. She climbed her hardest grades because she worked on her mental training. She was physically training as well. The thing that really made the difference was that she worked on her psychology. So I think that's the exciting place if you're an older athlete, to explore that side of it. And you also just learn so much about yourself, and it's just like a whole new world, I think. And it helps you in other areas of your life too. Physical training rarely kind of helps you, but like, say you're still in your career and you learn about stress and fear management, this could really help you in your professional life as well. So I just think that there's so many benefits for it.
Thanks for sharing that. You also just preempted a listener question from Ritu Sen, who was asking precisely about the anxiety of fragility that she feels in herself when she is out either running or climbing, where she thinks that she might get injured. And my, let's say, amateur, one thing I have learned about myself is the more I doubt myself, and the less I am to push myself in that thing, and then the less I push myself, the more I doubt myself further. So it becomes maybe a doom spiral, if I may. The other thing that you said is also quite pertinent about this one coachee of yours, where they found, let's say, new peaks in their 50s. And I also speak with many athletes who are in the 50s, 60s, and even older. And some of them for sure are gifted, they are performing at the highest levels, but many of them did not hit their peaks until those ages. So I am curious, are there any other, let's say, self-limiting beliefs that people come to you with that you have helped process and help them break through?
Yeah, there's lots of self-limiting beliefs for sure. And, one of them can just be around age. It can be, I'm too old to improve. I'm too old to push my body like that. And coaching is a really nice space to explore some of those beliefs and kind of challenge them. And I think that it can be easy, or, I don't really like this approach of like, just believe you can do anything, or like, just turn it around and just, it's not that easy. And I know it's not that easy for people to just turn these beliefs around, but I think the coaching space can be really nice. What this makes me think of is something called growth mindset, which maybe you and your listeners have heard of. And it's this idea that like, we're not fixed. We often can feel very fixed about certain things about ourselves. I'll never be a brave climber. I'll never be the best whatever. And some of that's founded in some kind of evidence, but a lot of the time it's not. And what about just saying, okay, this is a weakness of mine, but I'm working on it. I have weaknesses in climbing. One of them is raw power. And I can easily slip into this fixed mindset of like, oh, I'm not a very powerful climber. I'll never be powerful. But what if I were to say to myself, and this is what I work on, is saying, okay, power is one of my weaknesses, but I'm working on it. And so it's taking ownership around these things. And if you have a fixed mindset, you don't take responsibility, you don't take ownership. So when someone says, I'm too old to do this, immediately they're closed off from different avenues of exploration, different solutions, different ways of actually improving. that are available to them. Whereas if you say, okay, I'm getting a bit older now, some things are more challenging, but I can work on this, and there's other ways that I can grow and learn and maintain and stay fit and stay active, and I'm dedicated to that. And so, a lot of mental training can just be around some of these mindset shifts as well that sound really simple, but actually can be extremely powerful.
Powerful indeed. And being self-aware and strategic. And then maybe to some degree, performing some self-compassion can help as well, because I think many of us who find that we can maybe we are feeling more challenged finding peak performance can sometimes come away dejected, where maybe your training session or your day outside wasn't actually that badly spent, because you did maybe accomplish you did ABC things that one might be ignoring because one was so singularly focused on some other aspect of performance. Talking of peak performance, Hazel, I think, well, you may have said in the past that life isn't as sweet when you can't climb at your limit. How do you recommend people reconcile this and keep the joy alive when they are no longer able to perform at their peak? And sorry, I don't know if you actually said that or
There's
not.
two different
But I
concepts
think
there,
you may
right?
have
There's
said that.
peak and there's limit. And the two things are very, very different. We can always climb our limit. Like I am 7 months pregnant, and today I climbed at my limit. I climbed a 6C down at the climbing gym on a top rope. Usually this is a grade I warm up on. Okay, it doesn't matter if you don't know what that means, right? It's about the fact it's relative. Usually I would warm up on this grade, but today it was my limit, and I enjoyed it because it was my limit. Is it my peak? No, it's so far from my peak. So I think it's about reframing. Just because, okay, maybe you're in your 60s and in your 20s you climb 2 grades harder, but the feeling of the climb is the same. So we can still climb to our limit. We can climb to our physical capacity at that time, our physical and mental capacity, I should say. But that's not the peak. And I think if we let go of some of these outcomes, if we let go of like, I'm not doing very well because I've not climbed this grade, or I'm getting worse at the grades that I'm climbing, and actually come back to how we feel when we climb, the experience that we have. Or like if you're a runner, okay, in your 20s, maybe you could run for like 4 hours in the mountains or whatever. And now if you do that, you have to walk some of the way, and your time is like, you can't go as far. You can only go half as far. But when you're running, you're still feeling those endorphins. You're still outside. You're still pushing yourself. You're still challenging yourself. So all of the kind of reasons why you do that sport, they're still alive and well, even if you can't say, okay, I beat my time, or I'm just as fast as I am now as I was when I was in my 20s. So much of aging is about your mindset.
Sure. This transcends sports, because many of us are often comparing ourselves to our past lives. Are there any simple techniques you can share with us, with the listeners, Hazel, on how people can stay more present and experience that joy, that ephemeral joy of finding your limit at that moment of your life?
I think the biggest thing is, well, I mean, there's obviously lots of things you can do to be more present and train being present, and mindfulness and meditation are the obvious places to go. But one thing I would say is, what is it that's preventing you from being present and finding joy in these activities that are recreational? You know, I imagine that most of your listeners are not paid to go running or surfing or hiking or climbing. These are activities that they probably spend a lot of time and money enabling themselves to do, right? They probably take time out of their jobs or their families or other things in their life because they really enjoy those activities. And isn't it sad that it's not coming easy to us to find joy in them, right? Why is that? And I think that some of the main reasons are when we make comparisons to others, or we make comparisons to previous versions of ourselves. You know, when we step out, when we start focusing on what I would call extrinsic motivators, you know, things that motivate us that are outside of the task itself, that are independent from the task itself. So if you feel like that's you, come back to what I would call intrinsic motivators, where we're motivated by the experiences we're having when we're actually doing the task. And again, coming back to the reasons why you go climbing or why you go running. You know, is it to be the best runner in the world? Like, no, it's probably not, right? It's probably because you just love running. So reminding yourself of that on a daily basis it sounds kind of stupid and basic, but it honestly can be so powerful because it's actually quite easy to forget. You know, when you head out that door, why are you there? Is it because you want to beat last week's time? Or is it because you just love what you're doing?
Hazel, any quick habits of doing exactly that can help remind us? Is there a meditation practice of sorts that you recommend? Do you recommend that people start maybe writing down these thoughts somewhere? What do you think works for most people?
Yeah, I think a really nice place to start if you're like totally new to this would be to create a journal. And we often track our training, physical training, but we literally just write down like what we did, and we write down our metrics and things like that. And I think that can often take us away from the actual experience. So having a journal with like some prompts, like, you know, okay, how was the experience? What state of mind was I in? Or, you know, what thoughts and emotions came up for me today? Or what did I learn? You know, these kinds of prompts can be really powerful. And you just start like a journal around that. And then checking in with yourself as well to get kind of like, you know, an internal take of what's going on for you. And so just asking yourself 2 questions. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Before and after every task can be a good habit. So that's kind of more on the self-awareness stuff. And then in terms of kind of like being more positive, being more present, asking yourself, why am I here? Can just be really powerful before you start a task. What's my intention, you know, for the session, rather than just kind of going through the motions of the physical exercise? You know, what's my intention? Is it to enjoy myself? Is it to be present? Is it to beat my last week's time? If it's to beat my last week's time, why is it to beat that? To do that? Why is it that I want to do that? And then having some like maybe mantras, which are just sort of short phrases that can kind of trigger, cue, or remind yourself of certain things. You know, like maybe one is like, I'm here to learn, or I'm here to find joy. Be present, you know, just little things that are like personal to you. It's not for me to kind of come up with them, but they're just suggestions. They can be quite powerful as well. And you can write them down, you know, like if you forget, you can have a reminder on your phone, you can write them on your fridge, you can have it as your screensaver. You know, there's ways of sort of visually reminding yourself of these things.
One thing that I can certainly relate to is the power of writing about an experience in hindsight in this case, because I have done that a few times. I should do it more regularly. But I remember after some successive surf sessions which didn't go as well, I started writing down what about the surf sessions that I felt had gone well and maybe didn't go well. And I think that once I did that, my feelings about that day's surf certainly became elevated. I became more positive, just more joyous about what had happened in the ocean, and I started thinking about, the kind of waves, people at the beach, maybe birds that I might have seen, the light on the ocean. So something about that is certainly powerful. I think we tend to maybe over amplify the negative sometimes and forget about the totality of the experience. Talking about, let's say, mindfulness practices, one other question I wanted to ask you is, you, I believe, do some Vipassana. I think you have done some of those 10-day retreats. Any key takeaways there which also inform your approach to mental training, and maybe if there are one or two things from that listeners can benefit from?
Yeah, so I have done a few of the Vipassanas. I've done 3 of the 10-day retreats. I have kind of diversified my meditation though, so I wouldn't say I'm necessarily like I don't still practice Vipassana specifically, but I do still meditate. And yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from meditation and sort of the act of focusing your attention in certain ways. There's so much to learn from that, and so much to learn from, especially in our current world, of just being alone in your own head. Just not reading, not looking at the phone, not looking at the TV, just being still and doing nothing. There's a lot more to meditation and Vipassana than that, but honestly, I think that so many people could just benefit from actually just sitting and doing nothing, not thinking, not feeling.
Are you sure you're talking to a group of avid athletes and adventure speakers trying to get these OCD people to?
Yeah, I
It
think
might
it
be the
is the
hardest
hardest
thing.
thing. I think it's so important. I think meditation is really important for active people because in some ways our sports become our meditation, and that's what keeps our mental health in check for many of us, right? And I think that that's really great, and it's totally better than not doing sport. But you also can fall in the trap of becoming addicted to those sports, and not being able to sit still, not being there's so many people I know who will freak out if they don't exercise for 2 days. Like, this is not healthy. I think that in the outdoor world, the sporting world likes to think of themselves as being uber healthy, but there are definitely some practices in our community, especially around food, and maybe just sort of some obsessive addictive tendencies. So it depends who you are and how much you would benefit from this. But I think if you're the person who's like, I could never do that, you're the person who's going to benefit from it the most, is what I would say. And then, there's a lot to learn from Buddhism. I'm not a religious person. I'm very sort of like pro-secular thinking. But there's so much to learn from Buddhism specifically, and the practices within Buddhism, in Vipassana, this kind of training yourself not to either like crave things or be averse to things. Equanimity is such an amazing practice, being equanimous, where you basically kind of like just experience things as they are. I mean, this skill is such a crazy, like, amazing skill. like I've certainly not mastered it by any stretch of the imagination, but so much of the suffering in our life comes from not just being okay with how things are, right? And this is what Vipassana is all about, just experiencing things as they are, not wanting them to be different. So yeah, there's a lot to learn from this, and I think that the world of mental health, but also sports psychology. I do not know a single sports psychologist who is not using mindfulness of some type in the practices that they will teach their clients. I do not know of any sports psychology course or degree that is not advocating that people have a meditation practice. So it's becoming very much accepted that this is a tool that has many uses, and certainly in sport. Because if you think about, what does it mean to be good at sport? You have to be present with what you're doing. You have to be connected to what you're doing. So the better you can train your mind to be present, the better an athlete you'll be, essentially. It's just that simple.
Mindful training certainly seems to have moved beyond, let's say, what is just fashionable and hip to something that is practiced, advocated, all of those things. But let me ask you this. Asking a climber to go and sit silently for 10 days, I think it might be equal to freeing El Cap. I don't know. You tell me. You've freed El Cap a few times, so
I honestly think the first
to...
Vipassana that I did was harder than free climbing El Cap. Way harder. It was so hard. I can't tell you. But you don't have to do this kind of meditation. You could start with the app and just do 5 minutes. I'm a little bit extreme. Instead of just going, I'm just going to get the app, I was like, no, take me to India. I'm doing the 10 days.
I tried the app-based Vipassana, app-based meditation right after COVID started, like so many of us. The thing I hated about the apps was the fact that I was glued to my devices the rest of the day. The one time that I did want to disconnect, I had to put those stupid earbuds on to listen to somebody tell me about it. But I did discover something else last year, which allowed me to build a little meditation practice on my own without the need for apps. And I'm very grateful that I found that. And, running at the end of our time here, maybe just a couple of questions before we end, maybe a couple of fun questions. What is, Hazel, maybe one significant habit or behavior that has influenced you the most deeply in the last, let's say, 5 years?
Well, meditation, definitely, although I first did the Vipassana in 2015. Another one, I guess it's hard to describe as a habit. Maybe it's a habit, or it's a way of forming habits, maybe, but I'm just a lot more intentional now. I think intentionality is something that I've really brought into my life. I'm a little bit of a haphazard kind of person. Like, I kind of go with the flow. Like, I'm not, even though I'm an athlete, I'm not super disciplined like a lot of athletes are. I'm quite an intuitive person, which means I'm very good at kind of listening to my intuition, and trusting that like certain ways forward are the right path for me. But it means I can be forgetful. I can kind of drift around. I can be a bit goalless. So something that I've just really introduced into my life, and it was something that I needed to do when I started my business, was just being way more intentional. So like, what am I doing with my day? And so one simple way that I was more intentional is like, I started having a planner. So it's not like a journal, but it's like every night before bed, I would like reflect on what I did with the day. Did I kind of pursue the intentions that I had set in the morning? And then in the morning, kind of like setting my intentions for the day, not just like a to-do list, like there would be a to-do list there, but like the way that I would want to do those tasks. Just having a direction, just being intentional. But I don't know if you call that a habit, because it's not necessarily a behavior, it's more like a way of approaching behaviors. But that is definitely something that I've introduced and has been really helpful for me.
That counts. It sounds quite powerful, and maybe helps bring about order to otherwise
And I
lack of
work for
order.
myself. I think that's the key
And then,
thing.
yeah,
Like if you've got a boss that's telling you what to
yeah,
do, maybe you don't need to be like this. But I work for myself, so I think it's extra important.
I started this little venture with the podcast, and I also have to be mindful because there's no like fixed paycheck coming every few weeks, and it is important to at least prioritize the right things. Otherwise, the things that scream the loudest get the right attention. And then, yeah, just a final question, Hazel. You're about to become a mom, so congratulations and best of luck again. You had some of your most formative experiences climbing with your dad and whatnot growing up. Where would you take your newborn for their first outdoor experience? What would you be doing? Describe the day.
When they're still a baby or like when they're bigger?
You pick.
I mean, when they're still a baby, I'm sure their first outdoor experience is probably just going to be, we live near a lake and we'll probably just walk to the lake. But, I imagine that our kid is going to get dragged to lots of cliffs, lots of climbing areas. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what the first experience is. We have this like little rock near our house, and I can imagine kind of just taking them up that little rock. But you don't know what your kids are going to be like, I guess, right? Like, as much as we really want our kid to climb and to share this passion with us, there's no guarantees that she will. So I think there's probably some lesson learning in that, right? Accepting people as they are and not trying to shape them too much.
Certainly expose them to the wild and wonderful outdoors, and maybe gently nudge them into a harness but not push them too much.
They at least have to be able to be like, because
Oh god, gosh, okay, well, you have certainly some expectations of your child. Hazel, how can people find you and avail of your courses and your coaching services?
So the main ways are, we have a website, strongmindclimbing.com. You also can find my Instagram, Hazel_Findlay. We also have strongmind.climbing Instagram. That's probably just a good place to start. If you're kind of interested in like just exploring mental training ideas a little bit more, the best thing you could do is join our newsletter. We have a weekly newsletter, and we really try to have it not be boring. It's not like, what are we doing at the company? It's like we take a concept and we like discuss it. It's often kind of philosophical. It's more, it's called Thought of the Week, and it's just kind of like what we're thinking about. Like the last one I wrote was about like camaraderie at the Olympics, and kind of like how that can really help our performance and that kind of thing. So, and that's free. So if you wanted to just like, first step into kind of like exploring more of these ideas, that would be a nice thing to do.
The newsletter sounds like a great place to start. And yeah, if you have enjoyed this conversation, I encourage you to go to Hazel's website. The links will be on the show notes, and subscribe to the newsletter. One last thing I want to call out which is I think until recently you were personally available for, let's say, private coaching. And I hope this point isn't lost to listeners, that we can have, let's say, one of the most groundbreaking athletes of our generation available for private coaching, one-on-one coaching, which which other sport would you find that? So I just think that this is the part about these outdoor sports I find incredible, that the medium is so accessible and the people that we look up to, they're also accessible. Thanks again, Hazel, for coming on the show. And maybe a couple of years down the line, we'll have you back in, and then you can share how that parenting experience at the cliff is going.
Yeah. Hopefully she can be like me, and she's already climbing really hard. No pressure.
Wow. Well, a fun note to end a great conversation with Hazel. Her ability to merge physical prowess with deep psychological insight offers a unique and refreshing perspective, particularly for athletes navigating the spectrum that comes with aging. Hazel shared some powerful strategies on fear management, resilience, and the importance of mental training. Whether it's pushing through the limits of what we believe is possible or finding new ways to stay connected to our sport, Hazel's wisdom reminds us that age doesn't have to be a barrier. It can instead be an opportunity to deepen our connection to things we love and to continue challenging ourselves in meaningful ways. Her insights into the mental game are relevant not just to climbers, but to anyone looking to maintain their passion and performance as they get older. Her emphasis on staying present, cultivating a positive mindset, and embracing the process is something we can all take to heart. I know that I am going to double down on that meditation journey. I'm going to start my journal again. Well, yeah, I have takeaways for myself, and I hope you do as well. As you wrap up, I also encourage you to reflect on other key takeaways. Whether you're dealing with fear, self-doubt, or simply the challenges of getting older, remember that your mindset can be your greatest asset. And if you're looking to delve even deeper into these topics, be sure to check out Hazel's Strong Mind coaching platform, where she offers courses and resources to help you sharpen your mental game. Definitely subscribe to her newsletter. It does not cost you anything. Thank you again for joining us today. If you found this conversation as inspiring, and if you're new to Ageless Athlete, please do subscribe and come back. Here we record a fresh episode to keep us inspired and educated every single week. Leave a review as well if you feel compelled. It helps others discover the show. Until next time, keep your body strong, keep your mind stronger, stay mentally and physically engaged. Embrace the outdoors and stay ageless.
Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through Brad episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.